Good evening, in life leaders. How do you suppose big the problem is of sexual immorality among leaders in our country? And not just with our political leaders, but also in the churches or even at homes. We know this is a big problem for every one of us because there's so many unreported cases of women being abused inside the family, and the women are just not reporting them because they are afraid of the shame they experienced, as well as this could cause their trusted leader at home to fall. And it's a serious problem everywhere. And this is a problem across cultures, across nations, everywhere. This is a universal problem of human beings. So we learned last time that David had to pay for the sins that he committed of covetousness, adultery, and murder. Right? So as we continue right now with our study of the David saga, we're now in part 25, we'll be looking at chapter 13. So the title of our message for today is The Sorrow and the Sword in the House of David. With his sin of coveting someone else's wife, adultery, and murder, David suffered the same from his own sons and a daughter. That will be the difficult part of our study for this evening. So I would like us to really think about the lesson that we have here. God's punishment will be very painful. And we're referring to the sin of David in the past chapter, chapter 12. Therefore, think before despising the word of the Lord. That was the charge of the Lord against David, which encompasses all the three sins that he has committed. We will be looking at the last part of chapter 11, the remaining verses that we didn't discuss last time. And we will be looking at the first half of chapter 12. It's going to be a long one, so that's why I had to cut them into two lessons. So I hope that as I share this difficult story, that we will be able to handle the lessons quite well. We will be able to handle the story more maturely and more spiritually prepared. All right? So the first is go back to doing your duties and responsibilities. So let's look at the story, chapter 12, 26 to 31. Meanwhile, Joab fought against Rabbah. So remember in verse 1 of chapter 12, they were fighting Rabbah. Actually, in chapter 10, they were in conflict with Ammon, and their capital was Rabbah. So, meanwhile, Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and captured the royal citadel. Joab then sent messengers to David saying, I have fought against Rabbah and taken its water supply. Now muster the rest of the troops and besiege the city and capture it. Otherwise, I will take the city and it will be named after me. So look at the grace of God here. Joab knew the sin of David. David, as we learn in verse 1 of chapter 12, got lazy. He stayed in the royal palace instead of going out to war. And that led him to his sin with Bathsheba. And because of that, Joab even became a party to the sin of David by putting Uriah into the battle and had him killed in the front lines. They set him up to be killed with their war against the Ammonites. But the grace of God here is that Joab wanted to bring David back to what he was supposed to be doing. Joab did his part. He was very responsible for that. He led the troops while David stayed in the palace. He actually did more than that. He did a lot in the battle. He covered for David. He led the war for him while David was doing evil for at least for a couple of months. Because from the time that he committed the sin with Bathsheba until they found out that she was pregnant, it must have been a couple of months long, the military campaign against the people of Ammon. It all took a while for David before he got back into battle. So Joab actually did a very excellent job in capturing Rabbah of Ammon. But we see here in verse 27, he sent a messenger to David because David, you have to go back to leading us in battle. Joab was very conscientious. He knew that David must get the credit, not him. He was not willing to cover for David anymore. He told David to finish the job that he started for him. He knew the consequences for David would be bad if David do not go back to fighting the battles of the Lord, being the king. This happened, remember, between David himself and Shaul. David was fighting the battles of Shaul. And that's why David became more famous. And that's why people loved David more than Shaul. And Joab was avoiding that. It's bad for the king to never show up and finish the job. Joab didn't want to get the credit. He wanted David to get the credit and glory instead of him. Verse 29. So David mustered the entire army and went to Rabbah and attacked and captured it. So David was actually the one who finished the job. David took the crown from the king's head, and it was placed on his head. It weighed a talent of gold, and it was set with precious stones. That was a big accomplishment. The good thing here is David was back to fighting God's wars. This was a holy war. This was accomplishing what God commanded them to do, to subdue their enemies. But again, remember, God told them not to take over the land of the Ammonites. So they only subdued them. Okay? Was David distracted during the war? We don't know. Maybe. Because he knew he committed sin. Maybe there was something back in his mind that he could actually lose this because he committed sin against the Lord. Remember when the people of Israel, Achan, when they were trying to capture Ai, nobody knew that Achan was the one who made them lose the battle because of his sin. And Joshua was wondering, what did we do wrong? Why did we lose this battle? It was because of Achan. Maybe that was also in the back of the mind of David. He committed sin against the Lord and he could potentially lose this battle. But at least by God's grace, they were able to win over the people of Ammon. So was he rusty in fighting? We don't know. I'm just asking questions that the text doesn't actually tell us, but it didn't look like it because he actually won the battle. But maybe he felt some rustiness because he stopped fighting the Lord's wars for maybe again for a couple of months. Was he refreshed doing the work of the Lord? Now, it should be. Going back to what you should be doing should refresh you, even though you felt a little bit rusty, right? I think everybody could understand this when you stop doing what you're supposed to be doing. And it's so hard to get back the momentum, right? But at least David was back in his winning ways. Now, David took the victory convincingly and he became more powerful and richer. And look at what God has blessed him. The crown of the king of Ammon, which was a very precious crown, very beautiful crown, he got it and he earned it. Okay? David took a great quantity of plunder from the city and brought out the people who were there, consigning them to labor with saws and with iron picks and axes, and he made them work at brick making. David did this to all the towns of the people of Ammon. And then he and his entire army returned to Jerusalem. Now, David could have missed this if he didn't come back to fighting the Lord's wars. And maybe he missed really doing the right thing. Again, by the grace of God, Yoav did the right thing and David got the glory by winning this war. Maybe you have felt the same way. You've done something wrong but still God blessed you because God is gracious. So I can imagine David being in high spirits that God was forgiving him, that he was able to win this. He probably was very relieved that God gave him this victory that he neglected earlier. So that's a very important point for us to remember. Go back to doing your duties and responsibilities if you have skipped that and spent your time in doing sins. David should be thankful that Joab did not take advantage of him, being sidetracked by covetousness, adultery, and murder. His army chief still gave him the opportunity to get the credit that he did not work for. So when you have committed sins against the Lord and he has not taken you away from your position, the Lord still wanted you there. You ought to get back to what you should be doing. All right? Whether people know about it or not. Certainly the Lord knew of this. All right? The second lesson is resist sexual temptations sternly. Because if you don't do this, temptation will eat you up. Since David committed sexual sins which led to other worse sins, he saw how these also destroyed the lives of his sons and a daughter of his, Tamar. Okay? So let's look at the story. Again, let me give you a caution. This is a very difficult story to really study. Right? Because this is a very bad story, especially for women. Okay? Because as we talk about it, it could get very graphic in your minds. And maybe some of you have a similar experience. It might bring some bad memories back. Okay? In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Avshalom, son of David. Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. She was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. Now, if you look back in chapter 3 of the same book, 2 Samuel, verse 3, Amnon was David's firstborn. And being the firstborn, he get double portion of all the inheritance that all his other brothers would be receiving. And probably he could be the next king of Israel. His mother was Ahinoam of Israel, or in English, Jezreel. She may not be the same Ahinoam, daughter of Ahimaaz and Shaul's wife. I think these are different women. They just happen to have the same name, Ahinoam. So Shaul had a wife named Ahinoam, and David also had a wife named Ahinoam. One was the daughter of Ahimaaz, and the one is from Jezreel. So Absalom and Tamar were children from Talmai, the treaty wife of David. And remember, Talmai was from Geshur, the daughter of the king of Geshur. And Geshur is in the northeastern side of the Sea of Galilee. They were neighbors with Israel. Okay? Amnon and Tamar were paternal siblings in this case. Amnon had a different mother, and Talmai had a different mother, but the same father, David. So Amnon's obsession was eating him up. Now, maybe we could compare this with the obsession of David with Bathsheba. That he was so into having Bathsheba that he committed murder, having Uriah killed in battle. And we will see from the story that Amnon was so obsessed with his sister that he actually took advantage of her. So, as David could not do anything legally and morally to Bathsheba, what did David do? He had to violate the law. Amnon also could not marry his sister. So he also had to despise the law of the Lord, only to have Tamar. Because the law says in Leviticus 18 verses 9 and 11, do not have sexual relations with your sister, either your father's daughter or your mother's daughter, whether she was born in the same home or elsewhere, as long as you have at least one common parent. Okay? Verse 11, do not have sexual relations with the daughter of your father's wife, born to your father, she is your sister. So it doesn't matter if she's only your half-sister, she is still your sister. And the law prohibits siblings from having intimate relationships, with or without consent. Doesn't matter. So, if Amnon could not have Tamar, how much more marry her? And her beauty and of course her being chaste really attracted her to him. So that's why the verse said it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. Okay, so remember, this could be the next potential king. Okay? Now, the law also says that it is possible for people to violate the law. And so it provided another law if in case that happens. In Leviticus 20 verse 17, if a man marries his sister, even though it wasn't permitted, but those things happen, the daughter of either his father or his mother, and they have sexual relations, it is a disgrace. So there is a judgment. Okay? They are to be publicly removed from their people. That means their citizenship from Israel had to be removed. He has dishonored his sister and he will be held responsible. Not really the woman. Even if the woman was consenting to the relationship, the man was judged for doing this. Alright? Verse 3. Now Amnon had an advisor named Yonadab, son of Shim'ah, David's brother. He asks Amnon, why do you, the king's son, look so haggard morning after morning? Won't you tell me? Amnon said to him, I'm in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. You will find out that Amnon got a bad advisor with Yonadab. We'll find out later what the advice would be. And this happened to be, of course, his cousin. But the author is already telling us what kind of person Yonadab is. He was a very shrewd man. Why? So we can anticipate what kind of advice he'll be giving Amnon. Now, we need to protect ourselves, even our house, from bad advisors. Because the enemy will send bad people advising us to violate the law of the Lord. They could be your friend, your best friend, your relative. They could be sent by the enemy. So be wise of bad advisors around you. They may not be technically formal advisors in your life, but they could be just keeping on influencing you. So verse 4, Yonadab might be looking forward to becoming the most trusted advisor of Amnon. He's trying to get closer with Amnon, knowing that Amnon could be the next king after David. So by advising him, he's positioning himself to be a very trusted advisor of Amnon. Now, Amnon did not resist the temptation of falling in love with his sister. That's a red flag. And Amnon wasn't even resisting it. Okay? He might be intentionally showing his haggard look to gain some sympathy. And who got his attention? It was Yonadab. Okay? Verse 5, go to bed and pretend to be ill. Yonadab said, when your father comes to see you, say to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight so I may watch her and then eat it from her hand. Look at the advice clearly. He was giving into the desire of Amnon instead of advising Amnon, she's your sister, stop this. Okay? He even gave him a suggestion on what to do. And he ended the advice there. Okay? He didn't say anything more than that. It was up to Amnon what to do after doing this. You see the advice? How shrewd Yonadav was? The advice of Yonadav to Amnon was not to follow the law, but to break the law. He was empowering Amnon by his support. He gave him a plan how to get Tamar. He stopped at that idea, eating from her hand, and that's it. You know what to do next. It's up to you to think about as long as you had that opportunity. He did not clearly say what to do with Tamar after that, but that was already understandable. Yonadav, of course, would then become blameless after that, since he didn't directly said, now you can take advantage of your sister. Right? Now, the advice of Yonadav was not only about Amnon getting Tamar, but also how Amnon can destroy the house of his father David. And that was something that Amnon didn't realize. By doing this evil act, he was destroying himself and the house of his father. Yonadav wasn't a spiritual advisor, and you can see that from the onset. He was an evil advisor. And we should be careful with shrewd, smart-looking, wise-sounding people. Okay? And you know that from your spirit, if the person giving advice is a bad advisor. Verse 6, so Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. When the king came to see him, Amnon said to him, I would like to see my sister Tamar to come and make some special bread in my sight, so I may eat from her hand. So he perfectly followed the advice of Yonadav. So for Amnon, the advice of Yonadav was empowering. He was inspired. He did not even realize that the advice would lead him to his own disaster and severe damage to the house of his father David. Now, the pretension here is a type of lying. Do you understand that? Pretension is a type of lying. Instead of asking for a physician, Amnon asked for his father for his sister. The bread is the solution, not even a medication. David should have seen this as a red flag, but he didn't. Okay, Tamar may have been a good baker. That's why that's the kind of request that Amnon asked of her. Verse 7, David sent a word to Tamar at the palace. David sent a word to Tamar. See that? He didn't know that this will lead to the destruction of the life of his daughter. Go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food for him. David became instrumental, and he didn't know about it. So Tamar went to the house of her brother Amnon, who was lying down. She took some dough, kneaded it, made the bread in the sight, and baked it. Then she took the pan and served him the bread, but he refused to eat. Send everyone out of here, Amnon said. So everybody left him. So by sending Tamar to Amnon, David became a part of the destruction of the life of his very own daughter, knowingly or unknowingly. All right? It didn't matter anymore. Seeing Tamar work there might have made Amnon fell in love with her much more. She's good at what she's doing. Have you heard of the Florence Nightingale effect? Or in other words, Nightingale syndrome, which is when a caregiver falls in love with her patient. Okay, so Florence Nightingale was a nurse. Okay, now Sigmund Freud said the opposite of it is transference, when it was the patient who falls in love with his caregiver. So this is the case. Well, anyway, Amnon was in love with her even before she was attending to her. Okay, so maybe he's suffering from that. So after all the hard work of Tamar, she must have felt disappointed, and she was wondering, why wouldn't he eat after I did all of this? What's going on? Maybe she was confused and upset at the same time for his refusal to eat the bread she prepared. Right in front of him, he could have said earlier, I don't want it anymore. Please stop doing this. I lost my appetite. No. And then the order for everybody to leave was even more surprising. So I can imagine Tamar feeling bitter of Amnon. But what she didn't expect was the next command. Then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food here into my bedroom so I may eat from your hand. He wanted her to feed him like how an elderly could not feed himself. And Tamar took the bread she had prepared and brought it to her brother Amnon in his bedroom. But when she took it from him to eat, he grabbed her and said, "Come to bed with me, my sister." So again, this could trigger some of you listeners and watching this video. I want you to be careful in learning this lesson. Okay, so by getting Tamar back to him, well, everybody remained outside. Amnon got his opportunity to take advantage of his sister. Tamar could not afford to disobey her brother. As confused as she was, maybe fear was getting into her heart. She might have been very scared of Amnon at this moment, but you see, could be the potential king, and she could not afford to disobey him. She probably felt uncomfortable at the situation, being alone with Amnon and so close to him, feeding him as if he could not feed himself. Amnon went straight to his intentions in verse 11. "Come to bed with me, my sister." He didn't even say, "Come to bed with me, Tamar." He even addressed her as his sister. So was he asking Tamar for consent? Or was he commanding and forcing Tamar to be intimate with her? I think most of us would say it's the next option. He was forcing her, even though it sounded like he was asking for her consent. But actually, he was forcing her because he had no choice. Earlier, we cited that the law prohibits a man from marrying his sister. That's in chapter 18 of Leviticus, verse 9 and 11. Now, Amnon did not care about the law of the Lord or about Tamar, her own welfare. He desperately wanted her. And also the law says that he must pay her bride price if he wanted her. That's in Exodus 22 verse 16. Although in this case, the law was probably not thinking of an incestuous relationship. If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price and she shall be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins. Alright, a lot of people would say or misinterpret this as the law was commanding rape victims to marry their rapists. Now, we have to understand during their time that if a woman loses her virginity, she probably will lose all of her life. What the law was trying to prescribe here is the woman's life had to be saved by the man. You have to not only pay for the bride price, but you have to pay for her whole life because you actually destroyed it. You got it from her, you have destroyed her life, you have to take care of it. Okay? Of course, the father had the option to refuse marriage. Okay? Because we know marrying your rapist may not be the best solution in this case. Okay? So there is no prescription of imprisoning the rapist because it will be even a loose situation in the case of the rape victim. Okay? Now, if you want to discuss more about this, maybe we can talk about this some other time. But I'm just saying to you that Amnon probably wasn't thinking about paying the bride price. Okay? We'll find out later on. Verse 12, "No, my brother," she said to him, "don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing. What about me? Where could I get rid of my disgrace? And what about you? You would be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you." No. Tamar did the right thing. She righteously refused Amnon's command of sleeping with her. Women, speak up. Just as Tamar spoke up here. Speak up against the wrong thing if someone is trying to attempt to abuse you. Okay? Remember what she said there. This is a wicked thing. She was sort of trying to condemn him. This is a wicked thing. She clearly said that the act is wrong and should be avoided in the whole kingdom. Okay? So verse 13, look at how she appealed. She appealed to herself and she appealed to his own case. What about me? And what about you? Okay? What about me is Tamar's way of pleading for her life. Now when she said, where could I get rid of my disgrace? Of course, it could not be anymore if that happens. She was not risking disgrace, even if Amnon could be the future king. It didn't matter. Amnon could not save her from disgrace, even if he becomes the king soon. And then he appealed, think about yourself. What about you? Everybody knew he is the firstborn and could be the next king. Tamar also made Amnon think about himself. The act would make him a wicked and a foolish man. This is one of the unusual things here in the last words of Tamar. please speak to the king. He will not keep you from being married to me. Now, it sounds disappointing that she was suggesting that David could possibly allow them to get married. Now, do you think Tamar was expecting David to allow them to get married even if it's against the law? Or was she saying this because she was trying to find a way out of the situation? I think it was the next one. If her father David agrees that they get married even they were siblings, at least she still had a life. Now, I think she was just trying to find a way out of the situation. Okay? I cannot blame her for saying this, that he will not keep me from being married to you. All right? Now, this is the worst part of the story, verse 14. But he refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than she, he raped her. That's really sad. Amnon was so determined to violate Tamar that he forced himself to her. The temptation was just so strong that Amnon could not resist it. As he overpowered her, evil overpowered Amnon. And Amnon didn't realize that evil was taking possession of him. I don't mean that a spiritual evil possession, but this was not even the fulfillment of the judgment of Yahweh on David in chapter 12 verse 11, because we learned last time that chapter 12 verse 11 was referring to Avshalom usurping the authority of David and sleeping with all the wives of David. Okay? If you remember what chapter 12 verse 11 said, this is what the Lord says, out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will make your wives and give them to the one who is close to you, that's Avshalom, the older brother of Tamar, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. So the rape of Tamar is not even predicted here in chapter 12 verse 11. After raping Tamar, Amnon still again needed to pay David bride price, even if it was his father. Whether he liked it or not, he had to pay the bride price. Whether David allows them to get married or not, because that's what the law says. If the father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins. Maybe for Amnon, that's nothing. Paying the bride price, that's nothing. Verse 15, then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. Amnon said to her, get up and get out. Now that's the worst thing that Tamar could hear. After being violated, being rejected, after being desired, being thrown out, was the worst thing that she could hear. Since Amnon raped her, he did not get the pleasure that he wanted from her. Of course, Tamar wasn't cooperating. So he was disappointed. He was expecting pleasure, but he didn't get it from her. She wasn't cooperating. And after abusing her, perhaps seeing her cry, Amnon came to his senses. I did the wrong thing. That's how temptation betrays you. It tells you to do one thing, to give in to your pleasures, but after that, it condemns you. It's a traitor. Temptation is a traitor. Satan is known to be the accuser of the brothers. Okay? But of course, he's accusing us of the wrong things which we haven't done. But for people who have fallen into his trap, then he will accuse you of committing sin. He's that bad. He was disappointed at what happened. This is not what I expected when I tried to have her. Now, he should have been disappointed at himself. Instead, he was disappointed at Tamar. He bent his anger toward her. His obsession became an extreme hate of her. So everything really went south. So we need to look again at what the law said when these things happen. Actually, it gets complicated again because they shouldn't be married. You shouldn't sleep with your sister. But what does the law say when bad things happen? Let's look at Deuteronomy 22 verse 28. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married and rapes her, and they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver. So this is the bride price. He must marry the young woman, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. So similar to what we have read earlier, you have to continue her life. Because if you don't, her life is done. If you don't take responsibility of what you have taken from her. Okay. He cannot divorce her. So obviously, Amnon did not want to marry her when he threw her from his room. And therefore, they will not be married in this case. Verse 16, no, she said to him, sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you have already done to me. But he refused to listen to her. He called his personal servant and said, "Get this woman out of my sight and bolt the door after her." Now, hoping Amnon would fight for her, Tamar felt worse for being hated after being wanted. She just lost her life there in that room. That was her horror room. Being thrown and sent away was betrayal. Being shut off from him was devastation for her. Her life was taken away from her there, and she left the room without any life to look forward. She came impure, and she was thrown out impure and crushed. Men have pity on women. Don't abuse them. Don't even think about it. Verse 18. So his servants put her out and bolted the door after her. She was wearing an ornate robe, for this was the kind of garment the virgin daughters of the king wore. Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the ornate robe she was wearing. She put her hands on her head and went away, weeping aloud as she went. So this was the very heartbreaking moment, if we could imagine Tamar leaving the room. Now, any person who could imagine this, and if you can avoid reimagining this, just don't reimagine it. Who would not feel bad for Tamar or for any rape victim? For any woman who has experienced something similar to what Tamar went through, this story again might be upsetting. Bolting the door was a terrible sound for her. Maybe she wanted to knock and plead to Amnon, "Don't do this to me." But she was really shut off. Giving up the ornate robe for virgin daughters, which was not her choice, to give it up, was very painful for her, because that was the sign that she was a very precious daughter of David. That robe was her pride, her value, and her life. She used it only to cover herself as she was sent away, but she wasn't ready anymore to wear the ornate robe because she wasn't a virgin anymore. She must have felt so unworthy of wearing it. So that's why, what did she do after that? She put ashes on her head and tore the ornate robe. Now, most rape victims keep silent about what happened to them. But Tamar had no choice but to show that she was disgraced. It wasn't her fault. She didn't give it up to anybody. It was taken away from her. The ashes on her head were meant to show that she was mourning for what happened to her. So people would not question her. Why did you lose your virginity? It's your fault. No, I was taken advantage. The tearing of the ornate robe, instead of passing it to her future husband or surrendering it to her father, was meant to show that she was violated. Putting her hands on her head and weeping aloud were meant to show that she had lost everything. So being a daughter of the king didn't matter anymore. She lost her life. She did not know if anybody, one, would understand her. Especially she's the daughter of the king. Two, if anyone would believe her. Because the one who took advantage of her was the firstborn of David, the potential future king of Israel, heir to the throne. And three, if anybody would accept her as a disgraced and impure young woman. She could even be an object of mockery. Right? So that was very difficult for her. Verse 20. Her brother Absalom said to her, "Has that Amnon your brother?" Your brother instead of our brother. Your brother. That was very painful to hear. Has that Amnon your brother been with you? He is the brother of Tamar. Be quiet for now, my sister. At least he called her his sister. He is your brother. My goodness. You keep on repeating that he is my brother. Brothers don't do that. Don't take this thing to heart. No, that's the worst advice that anybody could hear, any rape victim could hear. Tamar lived with her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman. Maybe she didn't want to live with her brother, but she had no choice. So Absalom should have been Tamar's defender. But hearing this response from his very own brother, from the same mother and father, that he is your brother, he's calling Amnon your brother, must have been very heartbreaking. Are you kidding me? A brother does not rape his sister. Brothers protect and defend their sisters. You should have even defended me. Well, actually, in our next lesson, we will realize that Absalom used this moment to usurp the power from Amnon. Amnon is the firstborn. He'll try to become the firstborn. But not only usurp the power from Amnon, but also from David in the next chapters. Now, to hear this, don't take this to heart. My goodness. That was very insensitive. Seriously, she lost her purity, and you say, don't take this to heart? She lost her value, her dignity, her future, her life. That's not the way to support and comfort a victim, right? You would rather tell the authorities, tell to the father, and put Amnon to trial. And Tamar living as a desolate woman was worse. Remember, she was the daughter of the king. Living alone, desolate, living desolate, she didn't have any option. She wanted to disappear from the world. Her brother's house is the only place where she could hide herself and get anybody's attention. Probably people would be looking for her. Remember, she was the desire of many men because she's the daughter of the king and she was chaste. She was the daughter of two kingdoms, the kingdom of Israel and the daughter of Geshur. And she was a virgin. So imagine people would be asking, where is she? Where is she? She might have so many suitors. And all of a sudden, she's gone. She was used to the public life. Now, she had to hide herself. Being a desolate woman maybe was worse than being abused. Desolate means deserted. She lived alone. Being desolate without any friend was bad. That's what actually they do with prisoners, supposedly. But of course, they form their own community in prison so that they will realize that they have done something wrong. But she was a victim here. Verse 21, when King David heard all this, he was furious. Of course, he should be. And Absalom never said a word to Amnon, either good or bad. That's strange. He hated Amnon, okay, that's understandable, because he had disgraced his sister Tamar. Of course, David being furious, that should be the feeling of any man, especially the king. This is his daughter. Who would not be furious at Amnon, at the whole situation? But maybe also at himself, because he sent messengers to tell Tamar, go and attend to your brother Amnon. Was David furious at himself? Maybe. Did he blame himself? We don't know anymore. He knew he was under the discipline of God, and maybe he was thinking, this is part of the discipline of God on me. Absalom was also being shrewd here. Do you see that, Absalom? He never said a word to Amnon. He didn't talk to him, either good or bad. His silence about the situation, again, was strange. He was not defending his sister. Did it matter to him? You will see that Absalom was again using this to take advantage of Amnon. Soon we will find out that keeping this peace with Amnon, with whom he grew up in Hebron, was a way for him to bait him into his trap. And that will be our lesson for next week. He hated Amnon. I could understand that. It seemed that he did not do anything about it because he was reserving it for a very opportunistic moment for him. There was no mention of helping Tamar except for accommodating her in her desolation or looking for punishment. Everybody was silent in the palace when something wrong really happened there. And the perpetrator was the firstborn. Resist sexual temptation sternly. While Amnon was responsible for his own evil actions, David's weakness for women influenced his son Amnon and soon his other son Shlomo or Solomon and perhaps his other sons to be weak against sexual temptations too and to disregard the law of the Yahweh. Now, many clergy from across religions and denominations fall on this same temptation. Spiritual leaders must take the law of the Lord seriously, and they must be protectors, not abusers of women. I'm sorry if this lesson had been very hard for you to handle. The sorrow and the sword in the house of David. The David Saga Part 25. Letter A, go back to doing your duties and responsibilities. As you have helped David, go back to fighting the battles of the Lord. And letter B, resist sexual temptations sternly. Be proactive and not reactive.